If you want to see Pete Hegseth get lit up, you've come to the right place. Pete Hegseth testifying before the Senate. And I will just say there are so many issues regarding the management of the Department of Defense. They are also relevant to this moment. It's difficult to know even where to start. But we put together a handful of them for you. So let's get right into it. Go ahead, Albert. This is, I believe, is this Mazie Hirono?
Yes.
I believe so.
Yes, it is.
Go for it. Yeah. She's from Hawaii.
Aloha.
Seth, you've had a tough start. At your confirmation hearing, my Democratic colleagues and I rightly questioned whether you had the requisite qualifications and experience to lead the DoD, the largest federal agency, especially given your checkered past, which included paying $50,000 in hush money to settle a sexual assault allegation against you and driving 2 veterans organizations into the ground. After only months on the job, our concerns about you have proven true, as far as I'm concerned. Instead of strengthening national security, you've turned the Pentagon into a dysfunctional mess. You are jeopardizing military operations and service members' lives with your unprecedented action of texting classified military plans to anyone who might stroke your ego. Leading the Department of Defense is more than just a PR campaign filled with photo ops. While you pose for cameras, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine continues unabated. Israel and Iran are also at war, in large part because your boss tore up a multilateral agreement former President Obama brokered with the UK, France, Germany, China, and Russia that curbed Iran's nuclear program and ambitions. Meanwhile, China advances in the Pacific as this regime undermines and attacks our allies. At a time when steady leadership is critical, we are confronted with crisis and instability. Mr. Secretary, close to 5,000 Marines and National Guards have been deployed to LA without the request or consent of the California governor or the Los Angeles mayor, Bass. Rather than calming the situation, this troop deployment is purposefully inflaming and escalates tensions. You claim lethality is your top priority. Do you plan to unleash this lethal force against U.S. citizens and civilians in LA and other cities?
Well, Senator, I would reject most of the characterization of that statement, including lethality against U.S. cities, when all of those National Guardsmen and Marines have conducted themselves with the utmost of professionalism, defending our federal agents, Americans, who deserve to be able to do their job to deport illegal immigrants after the previous administration allowed 21 million illegals to cross our border. I am not here to listen to rhetorical responses. I would like to have a professional response that I would expect from somebody who is the Secretary of Defense. Millions of people peacefully demonstrated.
You can stop there, Albert. The key there, I think that there's several keys. Of course, he's evasive, and you'll see he's even more evasive. But the other thing is that he and so many of Trump's cabinet officials do this. They all default to the praise of the leader and disparaging the last leader. And so, we had under Biden, unlike the last administration, unlike the Biden administration, we're handling the situation with immigration in America's cities, et cetera. You have to get that body check to the glass in every time in order to, keep your cred with the president. Continue, Albert. This is, show me the next one. I forget who we got.
Senator Warren.
Oh, this is Elizabeth Warren, who, of course, puts him on the griddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So President Trump has deployed the National Guard and then the U.S. Marines to Los Angeles over the objections of state and local officials, saying that the troops are needed to support immigration detention operations that are being carried out by ICE. On Sunday night, the president threatened to deploy ICE agents to other cities around the country that he sees as, quote, the core of the Democrat power center, end quote, specifically mentioning Chicago and New York. Secretary Hegseth, if the president wanted to deploy Marines to Chicago and New York City like he did in Los Angeles, would you carry out that order even if the local governors and mayors objected?
Well, Senator, because Governor Newsom was unwilling to address
That's not my
protecting
question.
federal law enforcement agents in Los Angeles, President Trump had all the authorities, and the Defense Department happily supported defending our ICE agents in the conduct of their job. They have the right as Americans to be able to do their job without being attacked by mobs. And
I
we will
know-
protect them in that
I know that
process. And
you
if
heard
other
my
states
question.
needed it, we would provide that.
I know that you heard my question. So you would be willing to send troops if the president ordered it to Chicago, New York City? That's right.
Well, thankfully, New York City, unlike California, unlike Gavin Newsom, is willing to step up and address the issue with their local law
I will
enforcement.
take that as a yes. How about if the president says he wants to send troops to 15 cities? Would you be willing to do that?
Senator, I don't accept your hypothetical because it's
That's a hypothetical.
Not a real
That's
one.
the question. You're the Secretary of Defense. Would you send troops to 15 cities if the president said do it? Would you do it? 15 cities.
Again, Senator, it's a complete hypothetical lacking any context
Look,
at all.
You're the Secretary
And I refuse
of
to box
Defense.
myself in based on
Well, you can
questioning on a
refuse, but
hypothetical.
you're here asking for $1 trillion, and I want to know how you're going to spend it. And so my question is, if Donald Trump tells you to send troops to 15 American cities, are you going to spend the money and send the troops?
Thankfully, we're spending money on securing our southern border, a way the previous administration
my
abandoned
God.
and allowed
Okay, so you're
21
not gonna
million
answer
illegals to
that
enter our
question
country. So
anyway.
defending
So
our
that-
homeland is a real
Yeah, once again, I hate that word homeland, but it reminds me of Nazi Germany. But the
answer is yes. Yes, he's
the-
going
yeah,
to
of
do
course,
whatever
he's already
Trump
done
wants
it.
him to do. Right.
in Los Angeles, and he rejects a hypothetical. You reject a hypothetical that's not even a rejectable hypothetical. It's completely grounded in reality. I mean, Donald Trump has just done it. He's just dispatched the Marines to Los Angeles. Then he talked about dispatching military to Democratic core cities. Of course, he goes Democrat or whatever, core cities. But the idea somehow that this isn't grounded in reality and it's a hypothetical that would never happen, that's absurd. It's happening right now. It's very relevant, that question. Now, you understand this is a committee concerned with money and the appropriations process when it comes to the Pentagon has been a little bit perverted because they put up the Pentagon budget in two different blasts. And they've done that, I think, for strategic reasons. But that's why she is talking about the money part. And go to the Angus King. I just want to show you how completely incompetent Hegseth is. This doesn't relate any longer to troops in American cities. This relates to the money and the appropriations. Go to the Angus King stuff. Do you have that, Albert? I sent it to you, I thought. It might be the last thing I sent you. Great. This is a conversation about the money and testimony about the money. Go ahead.
Senator King.
Mr. Secretary, I'm somewhat puzzled. I grew up in Virginia where Robert E. Lee was revered.
He starts with,
I think when I
Harry,
was a
hit the
kid,
pause for a
his birthday
second.
was a-
He starts with the question that is revisited throughout this committee hearing, and that's the renaming of military bases around America that were named for Confederate generals and Confederate war heroes. Those names, of course, replaced for obvious reasons. But this is why King is starting with a reference to this, because Hegseth has been dogged in his defense of going back to the original Confederate general names on these Air Force bases, on these military bases, I should say. Go ahead.
school holiday. But as I grew older and learned more about American history, I learned that he fit the classic definition of a traitor. He
Robert
took up
E. Lee.
arms against his country. He broke his oath as a member of the United States Army, which he took upon entering his career at West Point. Why are you going through these incredible gymnastics finding current soldiers or other soldiers to rename. And you slipped a minute ago. You said we're returning these bases to their original names. Robert E. Lee, leading general of the Confederacy, Pickett, the other names. Why are you doing this? I don't understand what the motivation is to rename bases for people who took up arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this?
Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy, there's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do all the time, before and later. And we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history, erasing names, erasing base names that service members are tied to.
Not
Talk to people
erasing
that serve
history,
at Bragg.
it's recognizing
Ask people that serve
history.
at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning if they like the fact that the names have been returned. And to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg, and thank God we're back. And thankfully, because so many men and women in this country have served, there's a Benning and a Bragg and a Pickett and a Hood has a Silver Star or a Medal of Honor that we could rename the base to because of the limits of what Congress allowed us to do. So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army, and those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was instead of trying to play this game of erasing names.
We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War, where people took up arms against their country on behalf of the institution of slavery. And to continue the practice of recognizing those people and honoring them by the naming of these bases is, I believe, an insult to the people of the United States. Let me talk about the budget.
This is the part
I don't
really wanted you to
understand
hear,
why the budget
So stay with me
is
for 2
coming
more
to
minutes
us
on
in
it.
two pieces.
It's
Why
in
not
two
give us an
pieces.
honest base budget instead of putting a piece of it in recognition, in reconciliation? As I understand it, OMB is saying we're going to have a flat defense budget for the next 4 or 5 years. Are we planning reconciliation every year from now
Stop
on?
for a
Why
second,
not give
Albert.
us an
I just want to
honest
remind
budget?
everybody,
us what you're-
reconciliation is simply a process that's typically linked to money and appropriations that allows a simple majority vote. It allows you to get around having to, win over members of the opposing party to get your budget through. So when he refers to reconciliation and that process, that's what he's talking about. And the two pieces of the budget is what he's questioning. Why not just put one Pentagon budget in place? Now, go ahead.
Priorities are, and then we can consider it. This committee always works in a bipartisan basis on a defense budget. We all want to see some increases in the defense budget, and yet you're giving us this this fake, here's a piece of the budget, here's another. You're cutting in the base budget, you're cutting shipbuilding in half and saying, well, we're going to make it up in reconciliation. Are we going to have reconciliation every year, which basically, by the way, puts a significant part, 10 or 15% of the defense budget in a wholly partisan decision-making process, whereas in the history of this committee, it's always been bipartisan. Why are we doing it this way?
Senator, from our view, the budget number 961 meets the requirements and threats that we face. And
That's not the number. The number is 892.6. You're adding reconciliation. That's my whole point. Why not give us a base budget of 961 or whatever the right number is, what you consider the right number, and then we can operate and make our decisions. Why do it in this bifurcated way that really is fooling the American people about what the defense budget is?
We're not trying to fool anybody, sir. It's two bills, one budget.
I haven't asked my
We're
question
working with
yet. Why is it-
OMB,
why is it
and
being
we
done
feel
this
very
way?
comfortable
Why
with
is
the
it being
number of
done this way?
961 billion.
Why don't you give us a straight up budget for the Defense Department? That's my question.
Senator, this is a straight up budget for the Defense Department. It's a
It is not.
13% increase over what Joe
It
Biden
is a
gave us.
two-part defense budget. Part of it is in reconciliation instead of in the budget that's being presented to this committee. This committee only has a partial review of the budget.
There
I
you
don't
go.
understand why we can't have an honest, straightforward
thank you,
budget
Albert,
instead of
and-
this.
Yeah, and what you're seeing there, and the reason I really want you to see it, is you're seeing the utter incompetence of Hegseth. You're seeing how he's a talking head. He was a weekend host, hoping to someday be the weekday host on Fox and Friends. He's scooped up because he's got a good rap and a good look, and that's all that Trump cares about. And he became the Secretary of effing Defense. And so when it comes to running this insanely expensive, complicated personnel hornet's nest that is DOD, you have an utter incompetent in there. So incompetent is Hegseth that he was removed from a veterans charity by the board controlling it because he ran it into the side of a mountain. An effing charity. He can't administrate his way out of a paper bag. And he is running the nation's defense at a time of incredible danger. I mean, we have a potential theater of war emerging in the Middle East. And then you have a president who is bent on settling political scores by dispatching the military to a bunch of Democratic cities that overwhelmingly are blue in the judgment of this president. It's just a sign of the rot and the toxicity in Washington. And I wanted you to see some of it. When they actually have to account for what they're doing, they can't do it. And they just go on bloviating. They just go on with the propaganda, with the talking points. The Biden administration, thank goodness for our fearless leader. Donald Trump, in his wisdom, in his vision. I mean, again, if the guy was wise and he had vision, I'd give him credit for it. It's just talking points, and it's sad and it's dangerous. So I just wish one time a brave Democrat would ask any former Fox host, does Fox News lie? And if they waffle, follow up with, didn't Fox pay $750 million for lying? Put them on the hot seat. Yeah, you know what? You're right. I don't know who that is asked to, but you're saying, hey, ask one of these ex-hosts that question. The hearing that they're involved in on Capitol Hill today, from which we played a couple of clips, and we've got one more I can even play for you. It's about money primarily, and so they ask these questions relative to money being spent, and that's the reason that I think a question like that might be harder to shoehorn in. But there are plenty of questions about policy, so perhaps you could get it in there. If you ask the Secretary of Defense this guy, Pete Hegseth, he is just a propaganda machine. I mean, he's unbelievable. He spins, he talks over people. That's why he got the job. Trump hired people who are PR ninjas. And Hegseth, it's ironic because Hegseth is a PR mess. He is a PR nightmare. If you're handling the public relations for Pete Hegseth, you're on constant alert and you're constantly doing crisis control, right? Yet he got the job because he is good on TV. That's the reason he got the job. He spins so well. He talks over people. He talks about Trump. He talks about the military in this proud way that completely obliterates whatever the issue is. So it is weird and probably difficult to ask him any kind of question along those lines. I do want to give the boys and girls that last, the Tammy Duckworth thing, Albert, which we have yet to play. This is Hegseth talking to Tammy Duckworth, again, the senator, this morning on Capitol Hill.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to my colleague from Oklahoma, I believe the Secretary of Defense has just responded last week and admitted that the $1 billion mission that he led against the Houthis, who do not have a navy, has not restored the transit of U.S. flag commercial vessels through the Red Sea, and in fact has resulted in the loss of 2 F-18 Hornets to the tune of $60 million apiece, as well as, I believe the last count was 7 Reaper drones to the tune of another $200 million. You are blowing through money like my fellow cadets and I did in our first liberty after basic camp. Luckily, I didn't end up with a questionable tattoo. Your failures, Mr. Secretary, you've taken office has been staggering. You sent classified operational information over Signal to chest thump in front of your wife, who, by the way, has no security clearance, risking service member lives in the process. You blew the $1 billion fight against the Houthis, whom, again, as my colleague says, has no Navy, and yet you lost all of those aircraft. You've created such a hostile command environment that no one wants to serve as your chief of staff or work with you in other senior DoD leadership roles. But what we should all be talking about more than all of this is that you have an unjustified, un-American misuse of the military in American cities, pulling resources and attention away from core missions to the detriment of the country, the war fighters, and yes, the war fighting that you claim to love. I don't know if this is because you are too inexperienced and incompetent to understand the real threats facing our country, or if it's because you are just an unqualified yes man who can't tell the president how to keep Americans safe. You are focusing on renaming bases for Confederate generals. You said just now to Senator King that to a man and to a woman, we would rather be associated with the old Confederate names. Well, I am one of those women. I served at Fort Rucker, Alabama, a base that was named for a traitor who took arms against the United States of America, led troops who killed Americans. It was renamed for Mike Novosel, a Medal of Honor recipient who, in his citation for the Medal of Honor, includes that he saved 29 American lives, to include hovering backwards in a helicopter towards an enemy bunker where a wounded American was laying and saved that person, including after being taken fire himself. I know a little something about what it takes to fly a helicopter when you've been hit by enemy fire. That was heroic. I'd rather be associated with Mike Novosel than a failed Confederate traitor. I don't know whether you are inexperienced or too incompetent, but I wonder when you will actually focus on our nation's warfighting mission. We know that California is just a deliberate, systematic, political, and dangerous campaign led by you. We should not be using our military to play cops against Americans. General Kane, as chairman, a key part of your job is to coordinate military planning across the joint force. Is the department currently incorporating into any military plans expanding the use of the reserve forces to include the National Guard or active duty troops to support domestic law enforcement, including in other locations in the United States?
Senator, we careful.
No, General.
Well, it's not really a yes or no question, Madam Senator. We plan all kinds of different things.
I think it is a yes or no question.
I'm not aware of anything, but the reason why I'm answering is the tags may be looking at something that I'm not aware of.
What are you doing at your level? You're not aware of that happening at your level? Because we know that on his first day, President Trump directed U.S. Northern Command to revise its unified command plan to add new planning requirements to combat, and I quote, criminal activities. A series of follow-up executive orders continue to redirect DoD priorities to supporting domestic law enforcement, including one in April that tells DoD, and I quote, use national security assets for law and order. In other words, do law enforcement's job. I'd like to enter these executive orders into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Hegseth, you say you are focused on warfighting and warriors. These are your words.
And by the way,
you are
Albert, just
diverting
stop for a
untold
second.
duty
You understand what you
resources
just
and
entered in the
attention
record essentially is a trail back to the order that would allow troops to then be deployed to American cities and to handle various disturbances. Go ahead, Albert. Thanks, sir.
Fundamentally non-military mission of domestic policing. Across the country, we have qualified police officers who are trained for that mission. They know those streets better than the Marines you deploy to Los Angeles, who normally focus on the Indo-Pacific. And you recently approved 700 more troops in 3 other states to do admin and logistics works for ICE. You say all of this is valuable training, but I would much rather have our troops do tough, realistic training relevant to high-end combat. Instead of typing in spreadsheets for ICE, they should be conducting live fire maneuver exercises. Instead of patrolling American neighborhoods and standing in front of federal buildings, they should be rehearsing call for fire missions. We have local police who can stand in front of those federal buildings. And the list of distractions goes on. You are encouraging the DoD workforce to go work for DHS in increasing numbers. You're pulling the military away from facing foreign enemies who literally say things like death to America. And you're putting troops with weapons aimed at Americans. Mr. Secretary, let the military get back to its real job. Stop forcing them to do DHSs. And if you want to be DHS secretary, maybe you can apply for that job when you're fired from this one due to your incompetence.
Yeah, that's very, very good. Tough not to love that. She is magic, isn't she?
Good day, sir.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.